everyone out in plant pod land. I need to come up with a name. What do you guys want to be called? I think you need a name, whether you're the gardeners, no, or we need a name for our community members. So maybe enter some suggestions in the comments, and then I'll be able to address you as something that you like and not necessarily plant pod watchers. Okay, so we are back. We have Aaron Deacon back in the pod chair. Aaron was here in August and really helped a lot of people out with their indoor pests.
I hope so.
And so we've got him back, and we have a whole bunch of questions for him. Today's topic all around...
Some outdoor gardening.
All around outdoor gardening.
Yeah.
So we're gonna just jump right in. Aaron, I have a whole list for you, and we're gonna bang them out. All right, we're getting started. Easy question, beginning question for you.
Yep.
Can you use regular garden soil in raised beds?
Yes, you can. Yeah, so with raised beds, pretty much any vegetable or fruit that you're growing is going to like a lot of water retention. They do need aeration as well, but yeah, regular garden soil, like a triple mix is what most people will buy. And that's completely fine. And then you can kind of amend it from there. You will get more growth if you have a good quantity of aeration, which can be achieved through compost, which triple mix usually has. Sometimes I don't recommend triple mix because you don't know the source of it. So it can have weed seeds or a lot of bark and things like that. So sometimes it's not the best. Yeah, you can 100% use regular garden soil. Yeah, just make sure you have a good quality compost with it and you're getting it from a good source.
Okay, I have a personal question for you.
Yep.
I have an area in my garden that's very sandy. How do you fix garden soil that is super sandy?
Compost.
Compost.
Yeah, so any organic matter is going to basically add some water retention because sand has great drainage, but it's not going to hold on to water ever.
Right.
So by adding compost, you kind of add that water retention back in. So that is the key to kind of helping any sandy soils.
Okay, I'm going to try that. I asked that question because I was reading the next question from our community, which is different, and I'm going to read theirs now.
Cool.
How do you fix clay heavy soil?
So same thing, compost is basically going to help fix clay heavy soil. Clay heavy soil is tricky. Compost is definitely the best. Sand is good as well because it's going to offer some drainage. With clay, it's a very, very small particle, so it just binds together very easily when it's wet.
So
just doesn't
dense.
want, yeah, it is. So yeah, compost, sand, and then growing certain vegetables will help break up clay as well. So any like beets, things like that grow, or like carrots that kind of penetrate deep into the soil and grow like something within the soil is going to help kind of break up clayey soils. And so that's a great way to kind of get on top of that. But I know a lot of people have said with heavy clay soils, they have a hard time growing anything. So I think you kind of have to establish some compost in there to start breaking that up and then start planting, you know, root vegetables to kind of help break that up even further. Right. There's other cover crops that you can use that kind of send like big root masses down into the soil and it'll break up that clay as well.
Okay, clay soil, carrots, radishes.
Yes, beets, get some cover crops in there, some compost, some sand to help with drainage, and yeah, it's gonna take some time though.
Take some time. Ooh, this is a good one. Do you have any tips for fixing a poorly draining garden? Some people have those like sinkholes in different places, trapped water. Is there any hope?
Yes, there definitely is. Yes, there's tons of amendments that you can add to soil to increase drainage. Perlite is one most commonly used in bag soil. Rice hulls is one that I actually really love. So you can buy rice hulls in like a 50-pound compressed bag. It goes a super long way. You just mix that into your soil. It's going to basically create aeration pockets. It's going to decompose slowly over time as well to feed the soil. You can also use sand. So even like mentioning sand with the clay soils, it has to be a coarse sand. That's it. So don't go buy like playground sand because that's going to act like a clay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you got to find like a coarse aggregate, coarse sand to basically add that aeration back to the soil, create some pockets. You can buy a bunch of other things. A thing called grow stones is something I've used a lot in soil. It's a bit expensive.
Growth stones have the little porous pockets all over them,
They do, yeah.
so the microbes can kind of live in those little pockets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it creates a home, like almost like charcoal will or
Right,
any kind
yeah.
of carbon. Yeah, yeah. So it creates those little
Or
pockets.
lava stone. Do
Yep.
people use lava stone? Same purpose.
Yeah, they do. I wouldn't say it's super common in the garden. I don't know if it's as porous. I think it's
Okay.
got like some pores on the outside, but for the most part, it's
Maybe not throughout.
Yeah, yeah. So it's good to add drainage and like some aeration to the soil, but yeah, grow stones would be ideal, but they're I think more suited to like potted plants or smaller raised bed maybe. So yeah, I would do rice hulls or coarse sand. Is the
Rice
best
hulls.
way.
This is the first time I've heard about
Really,
rice
eh?
hulls
Yeah.
being used that way, and I think I need to go and try.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You can buy it from Black Swallow Soils in Brantford. They're a great supply for your rice hulls, all organic.
Got it. Perfect. What are the benefits of drip irrigation? Is it worth
Yes.
it? Like, I know it's a lot of setup, it's a lot of kind of getting yourself going. Is it worth it?
It definitely is. I've done it before. I had a passive drip system set up, which is really cool. So it's called Blue Mats, and it uses a ceramic tip on the bottom, and then the tubes are filled with water,
Yep.
so that when the soil dries out, it basically sucks the water out of that tube enough that it opens a valve and it starts dripping. And then when the water or the soil is wet, it just kind of like pushes that
Closes
valve
up.
back up. So those work great. They're very delicate to set up though.
Yeah.
And the issue with that is if you don't set it up properly, you can end up like flooding things very easily or killing your plants. And it's the exact same with timed drip emitters. That's the other method that people are going to use. The issue with that is that plants are not all uptaking water at the same rates. You don't know when it's going to rain as well. So
So it's not something that handles fluctuations in that as well. Is
Some will, yeah. Like you can buy ones with sensors. They're just more expensive.
Okay.
Like same with the Blue Mats. You can hook up a sensor now that'll sense the water moisture, open valves, and kind of let it flow. So, yeah, like if you're gonna do drip watering, then make sure you have a water, like a moisture sensor that's attached to that
Yeah.
drip system. Otherwise, you'll end up overwatering your plants for sure.
Everything,
And just
water
wasting
for everything, all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and you'll spend a lot of money because I know one person, they had their drip system set up and it was just watering way too much, and they got a water bill for like over $1,000.
Oh no.
Yeah. So yeah, it's great because it's easy to maintain, and like if you're going away or you don't really care to look after your garden or water, which
Really
I'm
hands off, but you
guilty
sounds
for
like you have to have
sometimes.
someone come in and really make sure it's properly functional.
Yeah, or just do your research and don't rush. That's
Okay.
the best thing. Yeah.
I think we're learning. We're used to not rushing on all fronts.
Yeah, that's
we're
good.
gardeners. We wait.
That's fair. I don't know. I'm a
We
gardener
wait
too,
for
but I
our
rush.
rewards. You don't. Aaron
Sometimes
doesn't
not.
wait.
Yeah, I'm a bad organizer sometimes, so it's last minute sometimes, and it's like, all right, let's just get this in, and that's where I've had issues with drip, is when I
Okay.
kind of rush it. Yeah,
Aaron.
I know. It's a learning experience.
Just so excited. Bit of a buzzword among our groups right now, especially our edibles, our vegetables, is no-till gardens. Top line, what is a no-till garden?
Yeah, so a no-till garden is where you are not disturbing the top layer of soil at all. There are like no-till shallow tills now where people are kind of like using a very shallow till.
Tiny rake?
Tiny little shallow, yeah, tiny rake, or yeah, like some people have a rototiller, and instead of digging down like 6 to 10 inches, they'll do like the first 3 or 4 inches just to kind of like mix up the top of the soil. But yeah, ideally a traditional no-till is just not touching the soil at all, constantly adding organic matter so that you're building up a layer of mulch that's going to decompose over time. So that is like a no-till, and that's the best way to do it. Just don't disturb your soil at all.
Okay, so if you were interested in starting no-till
Yep.
gardening, how would you get started?
For sure. So you would want to get
Mulch,
started.
mulch.
Yeah, mulch is great. It's got to be a certain type of mulch. You can't just do bark mulch for no-till.
Okay.
Because it's going to break down slowly. Like you need a variety of things when you start getting into no-till, because you really have to recreate, nature in a way. It's not just wood chips that are falling on the ground in nature.
Right.
It's multiple things.
Right.
And then
Ooh,
when
what
you're,
about dyed mulch?
I
Is the dye an issue?
Yeah, the dye is an issue for sure. Yeah,
Okay.
usually it's like a chemical dye that they're
Yeah.
using, so it just isn't great.
Yep.
And it's just literally for aesthetics. So yeah, I would to get started, what you're gonna want
This
to
is
do.
okay. So we have black mulch everywhere. That is
Yeah.
dyed.
That's dyed. Yeah.
Not great.
No. Yeah, any like red or black mulch is dyed. So
Okay.
just yeah, not ideal.
Don't
for
look
sure.
at the mulch in my garden.
But yeah, so if you want to get started with no-till, what I would recommend is taking some samples of your soil, taking it to a local laboratory, pay $50 to get it sampled, figure out what your soil is lacking
Yep.
in terms of nutrition, organic matter as well. It's going to tell you if you have a proper amount of organic matter, if you have enough microbes, and then start amending your soil based on that. So I would automatically add compost for sure, because most soils are going to need compost.
I think this is the takeaway for us today.
Compost.
Compost in everything.
Compost is king, yeah, or
Compost
queen,
is
however
king.
you want to look at it. I guess Mother Nature, so compost is queen. But and then mineral content is usually going to be lacking in soils too. So compost, minerals, get that back into your soil, and then you can start usually building kind of a mulch system. And that usually starts with cover crops. That's the best way to do it.
And so it's essentially starting your request, you're recommending
Yes.
that we test soil before we start laying any layering on top, because we don't want to disturb that top afterwards. So we just
Exactly.
want to make sure everything's set from the get-go in
Yep.
the right levels,
Yes.
and then we're just on top patting it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Patting it
yeah,
down.
so you're just kind of like feeding the soil at that point. So once your soil has what it needs and it's kind of where it needs to be, then like your job is now just to feed it and keep it where it needs to be.
So benefits of no-till gardening, other than just weed suppression,
Yep.
benefits are what?
They're huge. So benefits, the biggest one is going to be carbon. So when you disturb soil, soil is amazing at absorbing carbon dioxide.
Yep.
You are automatically releasing carbon into the atmosphere, and plants need carbon to survive. Microbiology in soil needs carbon. The decomposition of organic matter in soil needs carbon. So everything in this world is made of carbon. So when we keep that in soil, it's beneficial for everything involved.
Okay.
So that's the biggest one. Even I just watched a documentary on, I can't remember what it's called, where they lived in like a enclosed environment for 2 years, and it was to mimic like if they were to build a little base on the moon or another planet, if they could like
They have a
sustain
little
themselves.
self-sustaining
Yeah.
pocket.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was called now. We just watched it, but they said so they were having an issue with carbon dioxide emissions.
Yep.
So they didn't have enough oxygen, and they said when they like picked a sweet potato out of the soil, or they were like disturbing the soil, they could literally
Measure.
like feel the carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere, which is pretty cool. So yeah, anytime you disturb soil, you're releasing carbon dioxide. Also the biology in soil. So majority of the biology that's going to benefit plants live within the top 12 inches of soil. So when you disturb that, you're basically killing entire ecosystems of biology that have built themselves up, especially fungi. So they create networks of hyphae that stretch through the soil. So when you disturb that soil, you're just tearing up
The network.
those networks, and they have to reestablish themselves. And they are key for the suppression of diseases and pests on your plants. So that's why that's so prevalent in agriculture, is because they're constantly disturbing their soil, and that ecosystem has to rebuild itself every single year.
Right.
Yeah.
So no-till gardening, we like that little crusty layer on top that we don't want to disturb.
Yeah, and ideally, like with the mulch and kind of like keeping the top of the soil covered, like soil shouldn't be bare ever. You don't want it to get crusty. It has to be moist to be a proper home for living organisms. So that's where the mulch kind of comes into play with no-till,
Got
keeping
it.
it covered.
Okay, no-till gardening. If anyone wants to try,
It's the way of the past and the future.
Aaron is a
Get doing it.
proponent.
Yes, that's kind of what got me into all this stuff, was learning about no-till, especially for cannabis, because it was just something that kind of became prevalent 7-8 years ago for that kind of thing.
And everybody now
And
is reaping the kind of rewards from that as
Yeah,
a practice.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's kind of cool to see it evolve.
Okay, let's move into fertilizing. Just a couple questions on fertilizer from
Yeah.
our community right now.
Definitely.
What should I use to fertilize my vegetable garden? So edibles.
Yes,
How do we fertilize edibles?
for sure. So I would stay away from synthetics. A lot of people still love them.
Surprise,
Surprise,
surprise.
surprise. Don't use the synthetics, because they will actually disturb the ecosystem of the soil as well. So what I love to use is organic matter of any kind. So either like alfalfa meal and kelp meal, they're indispensable in the garden. You can buy like potash, which is going to add potassium back to soil. So I prefer like any kind of granular in a non-synthetic form, ideally. So that's where kelp meal and alfalfa meal is great because they contain tons of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, plus all of your micronutrients that a lot of the time you're not going to find in a synthetic. It's just going to be covering the basics. So that's what I love to use. Compost is a great way to fertilize your garden.
Oh, I have a question for you about something my children have been doing.
Yeah.
So my kids have long, lush hair,
Yeah.
not like their mother. And they've been taking it out of their hairbrushes and sticking it in my pots at home because on TikTok someone told them that that was a good thing.
Yeah, hair's a good fertilizer for sure. It just
I
takes
was
a long time to break
hoping you were
down.
going to say no, it doesn't work, and I could say, guys, stop doing this.
Yeah, it just takes a long time to break down because like it's a dense material, so you need lots of fungi to break it down. So you'd have to bury it. for it
Well,
to
this
actually
is
be
the
usable.
problem.
Yeah.
I have been running around grabbing clumps of hair that have blown
Yeah.
out of my pots.
Yeah. So yeah, bone meal is another one. Like if you want to use animal products, kelp meal, alfalfa meal, I like to use it because it doesn't contain any animal byproducts. But yeah, blood, bone meal, feather meal.
Eggshells.
Yeah, eggshells are great. They take a while to break down too. So what you can do is you can make basically a calcium phosphorus mixture with eggshells. So you basically bake the eggshells either in an oven or in a barbecue to get them like charred, and then you mix them with vinegar, and then that starts to break down the calcium and phosphorus, and you just let that sit and bubble, and then that's a good like quick way to break down your eggshells to actually be usable in the garden.
Yeah.
Otherwise they take
So that
quite
they
a while to
could,
break
so
down.
it's faster absorption than
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's tons of things like chicken manure, any kind of manure.
banana
is amazing.
peels. Some people are recommending that in our community. How do you feel
Yeah.
about that one?
Uh,
You're pausing. I feel like
yeah.
he's saying no to the banana peels.
yeah, I'm definitely a no on that one. Like it's a great source of nutrients, but the more I learn about fermentation, like soil is the exact same as our stomach, right? So that's one thing I want to start telling people is like soil is the stomach of your plants. So things have to be digested first to actually be available to the plant. So
Right.
people that are soaking banana peels in water for 48 hours, you're not doing
not gonna
anything.
do
Like
anything.
you might be pulling some starches off of the banana, and that can feed microbes in the soil, which in turn can feed your plant. But yeah, like you're not pulling nutrients off of that banana peel unless you're soaking it in water for like 90 days, because like that has to break down over
Right.
time to be available as a fertilizer. And even at that point, like not all the nutrients are going to be dissolved. Like you'll be able to use some in a liquid form, and then the rest will have to be decomposed by the soil further.
So maybe in conclusion to that, we'll say banana peels are not the best.
They're great if you break them down properly. But yeah, soaking them in water for a day or two is not going to do anything for your plants.
Okay. As we keep talking about fertilizers, people are asking, are we just fertilizing the roots? Do we fertilize the whole plant? Do the leaves get to be fertilized?
Yeah.
What is your perspective?
Both is great. So leaves are very efficient at absorbing micronutrients, not so much like your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium because it can burn them easily. But yeah, like it's super beneficial to fertilize your leaves as well if you can. And then roots, definitely.
Entire plant.
Entire plants ideally, because you want to create the highest sugar content in your leaves that you can, which is otherwise known as bricks. You can buy bricks meters. The higher the bricks of a plant, just the more sugar content it's producing, and that is a byproduct usually of your plant just absorbing all the nutrients that it needs from the soil. So if you can provide that to the whole plant, then the high sugar content will make them naturally pest resistant too. So anything that eats leaves will find it either bitter or it'll have so much sugar that it will get them drunk, and like sometimes
on
kill them.
sugar.
Drunk on sugar, yeah.
It's a sugar high.
It's a sugar high, yeah. So yeah, it'll either kill them or just like upset their stomach so much that they just will never come back to that plant.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
We like that.
Yeah. So I recommend foliar feeds for sure. They're a great way to kind of boost your plant and give them a quick source of nutrients, especially if anyone's growing indoors and they see deficiencies on their plants. Because leaves are so efficient at absorbing nutrients, it's a very fast way to basically fix any nutrient deficiency, where the roots will have a bit of a longer time to uptake and make a difference.
Types of fertilization: granular,
Yep.
liquid.
So they're both great. Liquid's usually going to be a quick absorption for the plant. So yeah, it's going to be kind of your instant absorption.
Your quick hit.
Your quick hit, yeah, exactly. And then kind of the difference between like a synthetic and a natural liquid would be Synthetics are generally very high in nutrient quantity, where you see things like a 15, 15, 15 or something like that. The issue is that plants can only absorb a certain amount, and most of those nutrients are immobile, which means that the plants cannot easily uptake them. So especially phosphorus, like when you have high phosphorus in a liquid fertilizer, your plant has like a second to absorb it, and then the rest of it's just going to get leached out of the soil because it cannot hold on to it. And then similarly with a like organic or a natural liquid fertilizer, it's hard for soil to hold on to that. So your plant's going to get that quick boost, but then most of it's going to be leached out of the soil with waterings. That's just kind of the way liquid fertilizers are. The benefits of obviously a natural or an organic liquid fertilizers, it's usually not going to be salt-based, which synthetics are. So they won't generally have salt buildup on the roots, and they will usually actually feed the microbiology in the soil. So they will make your soil healthier while giving your plants a boost, where the synthetics will give your plants a quick boost for sure, but then the rest of it's lost and it can actually end up damaging your soil ecosystem. Yeah, so liquids are great. Highly recommend them. They're a great way to give your plants some nutrients. And then for granulars, they are more of a slow release.
Right.
So yeah.
So a combination of the two
Yeah.
may be the best thing.
Yeah, definitely. And especially like while you're building a system, like for no-till, like you may find that you have to use a liquid fertilizer to kind of give your plants that boost that they need while the soil health is building itself and decomposing the other nutrients so that it can eventually sustain itself with just you kind of feeding it granular fertilizers or, just organic matter, ideally. Because technically organic matter is a type of granular fertilizer. It's going to break down slowly over time and offer those nutrients back to the soil. So yeah, combination of the two is great, especially while you're building a no-till system. It's kind of essential. Depending on what you're growing, like if it has a high nutrient like
Right,
uptake,
then you have
like
to
most
tweak it a
vegetables
bit.
and stuff, yeah, for sure. Yeah, like houseplants and stuff like that, you could use granulars pretty much no problem because they don't take a ton of nutrients. But yeah, for outdoor gardening, it's pretty key to use both. And then just, I always recommend going with an organic or just natural way instead of synthetics.
Yep,
But
we like that too.
yep.
Different fertilizers for different plants. So do
Yeah.
I use something for seedlings different than something for vegetables, different than something for hydroponic growing, say?
Yeah, for sure. Like if you're going with liquid fertilizers and synthetics, then yeah, you have to use different because they're going to have different requirements. Like a seedling's not going to need a lot of nitrogen. So you're going to have more of your phosphorus and potassium to kind of help with development
That
of the plant.
ratio just gets changed.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I don't know if it's arbitrary or not because like a plant's only going to uptake what it can at the time of its development. So, the numbers on fertilizers do become arbitrary at some point because like you don't know what the plant's going to absorb.
Just because it has a specific ratio on the bottle doesn't mean that that specific ratio maintains itself when it
Yes, exactly.
taken
Yeah,
up.
it's just the hopes of like there's more of that in there, so the plant should be able to absorb more of it in its time of need.
Yeah. It's like a guideline.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it kind of gives you a general idea of what's in it and like what your plant can absorb with it. But then yeah, it comes down to kind of like dilution ratios as well. Like if anybody uses synthetics, I guess I recommend always like diluting half the recommended dosage, because sometimes you can burn your plants with just like the recommended dosage for fertilizers, and then that way like you can. I like all-purpose ones, I guess, like a balance. I'd say balanced fertilizers are always the best. But yeah, it really depends what you're growing. Some plants are different for sure, and they need more of something than the other. And at the stages of their growth, like when plants are flowering and fruiting, they need more potassium and phosphorus than they need nitrogen, versus when they're just in their growing phase, they need more nitrogen. So yeah, it really depends, but ideally like you build your soil enough to the point where the plant can just ask the soil for that and it can readily provide it.
Yeah. It just asks.
Yeah, just ask.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, it's a beautiful relationship.
Okay, a few random questions to end our outdoor gardening segment. Can you talk a little about weedless gardening? So I know we got into it a little bit with the no-till. Is there a difference when people are referencing weedless gardening? Is it different to no-till gardening? What is weedless gardening?
For sure. So I hadn't really heard of weedless gardening before this, to be honest. So I did some research on it, and it seems like just kind of like what you have with mulch here. Like you're basically suppressing any weeds from growing so that you're not having that in your garden. I've seen lots of people do it with cardboard.
Cardboard.
Yeah, cardboard's
yes.
what I kind of started doing because it suppresses the weeds, it gives worms a nice little snack, and it also protects the top layer of your soil.
Yeah.
Other than that, like mulching your soil, but even mulch can have weeds in it sometimes, or weeds can come through.
I started seeing cardboard being used only within the last kind of few years, 3 years, definitely within the last 5 years, no earlier.
Yeah.
I've seen it increase in popularity.
Yeah, definitely more people have known about it. It's been happening for a long time. Like people
Yeah,
have been
okay.
using cardboards to start their raised beds. Because like say you want to start a raised bed here, you've got grass, you just lay cardboard down, kills all the grass, then you can just start piling your soil on top. So yeah, it's been a pretty common practice. Newspapers as well were a common practice for doing the same thing. So you just stack newspapers. So yeah, anything to basically like just prevent the growth of weeds is going to give you a weedless garden. But at the end of the day, I think weeds are a lot more to do with aesthetics, because weeds do actually help the growth of plants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a trend moving away from our manicured gardens.
Yeah, and that's kind of like no-till as well. Like
Yeah.
you want to, I guess we'll kind of get to cover crops, but yeah, like specific weeds will do certain things, and you know you can grow a specific weed to suppress the growth of other weeds
Of
and
something
things like
else,
that.
yeah.
Exactly.
I've heard there's a catch phrase that is coming up in our community a lot: soil loving plants.
Yes. Yeah.
I kind of did a double take on it the first few times I heard it, soil loving plants.
Yeah.
But now lots of people are talking about or questioning what soil loving
is.
plants are.
Yeah, most plants are. Like if you, obviously like some plants will grow in trees, like epiphytes, like orchids and things like that. So
Right.
they're not a soil loving plant because they need lots of aeration.
Air circulation.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like all of your fruits and veggies and things that are growing in the garden are going to be soil loving plants. Majority of like house plants are going to be soil loving
Yeah.
plants.
Most plants. It's the rare
plants.
exception that's not a soil loving plant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they all kind of need that relationship. It just really comes down to the composition of the soil for the different plants. So whether you need more aeration or water retention, so you still need soil for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We don't need it, I guess. A lot of people are getting into soilless growing now for houseplants, so using like leca and pon and things like
Yep.
that, which is cool. So yeah, you can get into like semi-hydro and hydroponics if you want to. It doesn't have to be in soil, but then you have to fertilize with a liquid fertilizer or some sort.
You have to compensate.
Yes.
I have heard something around potatoes, and it was this harvest. I was out in a farmer's field, and I heard somebody else asking a question that I'd never heard of before. Potatoes liking acidic soil better than more basic soil, alkaline soil?
Yeah, so pretty much most plants are going to prefer slightly acidic soil just because that's where a lot of the nutrients are, or a lot of nutrient availability is slightly acidic. So yeah, potatoes, they can grow in acidic soil, like down to 5. Anything lower than that, they're not going to love, but they prefer like the standard like 5.5 to 6.5 for pH, which is most plants.
Yep.
Yep.
So it's not
It doesn't have to be super
particular to
acidic or anything.
tomatoes. No. Or potatoes. I said tomatoes.
Tomato, potato.
Potato, tomatoes. Thanks so much for your time
You're welcome.
and wisdom. I think we're going to steal you back to talk next about winterizing gardens.
Cool. Beautiful.
Sound good?
Look forward to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Erin's back next time.